Tell us, what exactly could Racine be doing to get caught up? I don't think we're at pace right now. I think we've got a ways to go. So have you got some recommendations for the community at large? I mean,
well, number one, they've got to get a sense of urgency. I don't think that when you look at Racine, I don't think that there's a sense of urgency as a collective, that we've got to get things moving.
It must be Monday morning, because here you are again at Talkin' Racine. I'm here with Mr. George Myers, as usual. Jim Spodek is not with us this morning. He's, well, several feet away behind the camera. We have a special guest, Professor James Carlini.
How are you? How are you?
Good morning, Professor.
And of course, I'm your host, Dr. Ken Jorgen. We've got, I can call you Jim, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, that'd be fine.
We got Jim on board today because he is the author of this book, and he's quite a knowledgeable guy. In fact, his knowledge is what inspired him to write a savage attack against us via email, where he said it wasn't savage at all. It was a nice email. He said, I'd like to come in and talk to you guys. There's other perspectives in what you have. And we said, fine, come on in and talk. So this, why don't you give them just a brief overview on what location connectivity is kind of about and why you wrote it.
Sure. Well, when you look at real estate, everybody talks about what's the three most important words in real estate. It used to be location, location, location. But today, it's location, location, connectivity. And the reason I say that is that if you don't have high-speed capabilities coming into a building or a business campus, you're not going to attract the good corporate tenants. You're not going to attract Class A corporate tenants. And from a residential standpoint, if you have a high-rise, you're not going to attract the new, young, working professionals because everybody's connected and everybody wants broadband connectivity. So the book really talks about the convergence of real estate, infrastructure, technology, and their combined impact on regional economic development, which is so critical today in all municipalities. It doesn't matter if we're talking about Chicago or New York or Milwaukee or even Racine.
Got a question for you. Now, here in Racine, we've heard this concept discussed several times. First was Alderman Eddie Deal, and later on a candidate for mayor, Justin Wheeler, and now you, Professor. How does this work? This connectivity? I mean, what is it structurally? I mean, do we dig ditches, set up towers? I mean, how does this get established on a citywide basis? It sounds like the alderman and the mayor candidate and you were it's the same type of thing. They're saying we need to do this in Racine. We need to set up this high tech stuff because we need to get caught up with the rest of the world type of thing.
It's a mixture of all different transmission media. You know, we started out with copper. If you remember Alexander Graham Bell, we put on a network. We put together a network that was mostly copper-based. Then we moved to coaxial cable. Then we started putting in fiber optics. We put in microwave towers. We put in cell towers. We're at a point now where we're actually using a mix of all of that in order to support the network that we have today. And when we talk about broadband connectivity, we need super huge capacities, which means we need to put in more fiber optics in the ground. Copper-based facilities are obsolete. And when we look at office buildings, I would say 97% of office buildings are obsolete because they have copper going to the central office and not fiber optics. And if you're building a new building or a new business campus, you're looking at high-speed fiber coming in with diverse routing to 2 different central offices. And on top of that, you're also looking at cell towers and everything you can do to support this new terminal, which is your smartphone, because this has become the ubiquitous way of connectivity. Before, and we were just talking about this, before when we were talking about computer networks, we talked about connecting up via either a terminal or a laptop, and that's how we used to connect with different computer networks. Today, that edge technology has become smartphones and tablets.
Okay, let me ask something real quick. The infrastructure that we currently have, Are we anywhere near the capacity of that, or is it capable of carrying a lot more bandwidth?
No, we don't have the capacity. We need to add a lot more capacity.
Okay.
And even in venues like NFL stadiums and the different professional sports teams, when they first looked at supporting people with smartphones, that they could take a look at scores and take a look at different team information and even look at instant replays, they found out that they had to put a lot of antenna up into the buildings and up into the stadiums, much more than what they thought, because there's such a huge demand, especially if you have any video-based applications. It just takes on a lot of bandwidth, and you need a huge amount of capacity. And for the most part, except for very certain exceptions, we don't have the capacity that we really need to have. And if anything, that demand for capacity is growing even larger and larger every year.
Yeah.
Well, when you describe this, it sounds to me like most of what you're talking about would be done by the private sector, by the owners of the building. They put it in. Where does the community come in, like when an alderman or a mayor is talking about it? Is there something that the community is expected to do, the government, is expected to put up? Or can we count on towers like put up by whoever puts it up, AT&T or whoever puts it up? Who's actually getting all this connectivity built? Who puts out the bucks to get it done?
It's a mixture. It's a mixture of both government and private industry. When you take a look at the network carriers, you also have to have the catalyst. The government is the catalyst to say, hey, we need more capacity. And they have to make sure that the network carriers don't look and say, well, this isn't a market we want to be in, or there's a better priority market here. And that's what's happening with a lot of cities.
Now explain that, what you're talking about. There's a market here, market there. Are you talking about within the city, or are you talking about
within a region?
Within a region.
Within a region.
So what would the city of Racine do, the alderman, the mayor, have to do in order to say, get this connectivity built up in the city itself? What does the government, what would their role be with regards to these directing where it's going to happen?
Well, in some cases, you have people that want to build in a cell tower. And a lot of times you go to a planning and zoning committee meeting.
Yes, that's true.
And you get tied up in there. And it's
that's
a lot
absolutely true. Racine's famous for that.
It's a lot of minutia. And so what happens is that you don't get the cell tower that you should get. And that cell tower is providing capacity to all the people that need it. In other words, I might be a specific industry or specific business that says, I need that extra cell tower because I'm going to put in more capacity in, let's say, my factory, and I need more wireless connectivity. Well, if you put in a big tower, anybody that's around that tower is going to benefit from that added, that added connectivity.
Even if it's put up for your company?
Yes.
They can, people surrounding it can use it.
Sure.
But the company puts it up under their money, with their money, right?
Well, not so much their money. They're dealing with, let's say, a network carrier like AT&T or Verizon, and they say we're going to open up this company and we're going to need X amount of bandwidth, X amount of capabilities. And so the network carrier will take a look at that and say, maybe that's enough to put in a tower.
So it's still the private sector, but it's not the company itself. It could be a larger company, a carrier, like you say, that's working across the country.
Right. And what happens is that the more demand there is, the more likely they're going to put in a tower. But we want to make sure that you don't have a lot of people stumbling along like in a planning and zoning committee where they're worried about, is it a 3-inch curb that we should
Listen
be
to this,
in?
Folks. This is the thing we've been talking about for a long time. Go ahead, Professor.
Do you have a 3-inch curb or a 3.5-inch curb? And they spend 6 months debating that. I worked on a project in Illinois where it was an 800-acre intelligent business campus, and they wanted to bring in Class A corporate tenants. And what they did was, as a region, they said to all the small municipalities, you can't have any company tripped up with this minutia. And what they did was they actually talked about fast tracking all these different planning and zoning issues so that if a company was coming in to build a new facility, they wouldn't get trapped in like, well, you need you know, are you going to have 3.5-inch curbs or 3-inch curbs? So you can't do that
We're going to have
because
flowers around the light pole.
because companies are going to
Actual
move.
case, right?
Yeah.
Companies are going to move somewhere else where they don't have the hassle. Today, everybody's competing. Everybody talked about job creation, but few politicians delivered on it. And the reason why is that you talk about economic development. Economic development equals broadband connectivity today. And broadband connectivity equals jobs.
Okay.
And jobs equal votes.
I got a question for you. You've been in Racine now for, oh geez, 20 years? Or
So
more?
almost 30.
Yeah, 30.
Yeah.
So you've had a chance to get around, and you've seen what we've got in terms of like open land, available space for people to come in and build, or we've got some buildings that could be utilized as well. What do you see as available? I mean, is it things that people should be attracted to, that businesses could use if they were to come here, that they could build this connectivity?
Well, I look at, you know, one big hole right by the lakefront is where they had the We Energies building, which now is an empty lot.
Yeah.
And what just fascinates me is that Foxconn was looking for a building to bring in their headquarters, and they went up to Milwaukee to buy a building that they need to retrofit. Why didn't Racine at least come in and take a look at that empty space and give them some type of package deal to build a brand new facility with fiber optics coming in, with the infrastructure that they need coming in right at the lakefront, which then other people that are around that area could also benefit by that added infrastructure as well. In other words, you'd have fiber optics coming through there, you'd have wireless, and you'd fill up a hole in the downtown area with something very, you know, state of the art.
If that's suitable, I mean, then we have other land in Racine which is also suitable.
Oh, sure.
We have lots of land. We have lots of what they call green space. I think is what they.
Well, brownfields. Now, I guess
Brownfields.
it's green space now.
Yeah,
but
whatever.
Well, they have
grow grass on it.
They have to do something because they have to compete. And these other cities and municipalities across the country, not just in Wisconsin or Illinois, other companies are looking at other areas, and all these municipalities are competing. They want companies to come in and build new facilities.
Got a question for you. How do fiber optics compete with the eye system? In other words, if we had something, Mount Pleasant has an advantage over us because they're closer to the eye. Suppose we could way outdo them with fiber optics. Who would win the battle of the incoming new companies? Would it be closer to the eye? Would it be Mount Pleasant, or would it be us with the fiber optics?
Well, I think,
and I'm only asking a hypothetical
Sure.
question now. Suppose there were two communities like this. Is how effective really is this fiber optics in drawing new business into this area?
I think it depends on the product. I mean,
right. It depends on the company, but it's also, it doesn't come down to one facet like that. It's definitely a game changer, and it's definitely something that if you have it, it's going to make your area stronger than if you don't have it. And fiber optics, everybody's relying upon that. If you're a company today, a Class A corporate tenant, you're relying on fiber optics and high-speed wireless for all your applications. And just to give you an example, mission-critical applications, there's one, corporate facilities have 1 out of every 3 is considered mission-critical. That means that you can't have any single point of failure. That's increasing to 1 out of every 2.
Single point of failure. Hold on, I got to interrupt you right here, because that's a very interesting concept.
You're not going to bring
me
into this conversation.
No, very interesting concept about a single point of failure. And you best explain it. What I read in the book of an individual, the only individual could perform a certain specific critical function, and he gets sick or something like that, and the whole company shuts down. Have I got that right? A single point of failure. That's what you're talking about.
Or a single line going to the telephone
or it could be something
office.
Physical.
Right,
but
or
it could also be a person.
Right, or a single power line. And the greatest example that we can talk about of current failure was the Atlanta airport. The Atlanta airport failed because they didn't have network diversity with their power coming in, and their power came in basically on the same route, and when they had a fire, it knocked out the whole airport. But not only did it knock out Atlanta, it knocked out the rest of the country because they depend on Atlanta airport so much as a hub.
Now, what I believe you were talking, they had 2 separate sources for the power. but it went into the same line.
Right.
Yeah.
When that line got knocked out, there goes the
proximity
redundancy of the power source.
Exactly.
What good is it?
Exactly.
No, I think you had 2 lines, but it was the proximity that was the problem.
They were close.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
were just-
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah.
And when that area ran into a problem, it took out both
Yeah.
lines.
It's like if you
Instead
and I
of
are,
coming at the 2 opposite ends of a
Right,
building or something
exactly.
like that. Yeah, okay.
And that's becoming
Very
more and more
interesting.
critical.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
becoming more and more critical to all different companies.
All right, so back to your point about the. I'm sorry, I just wanted to get because I think you brought up a really interesting point to me anyway in your book when you talk about that. And by the way, small businesses are horrible with that. They haven't got enough people to back it up. The owner goes down and the business goes down.
Right.
You know, but in bigger businesses, you should have redundancy. You should have backups in every position and with all the machinery. Right?
Same with government. The same with government. In working with the 911 system with the city of Chicago, everything is redundant down there. We have redundant fiber optics going into the 911 facility from 2 different central offices. You have separate power coming into that facility. You've got a backup natural gas generator that backs up that center. So in other words, there is no single point of failure. And that was rated as like the #1 911 center in the country by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. And that's what we have to do. We have to bring out that type of robust resiliency to everything we do in Racine, whether it's a corporate facility or government. You know, your question is, where's the single point of failure in Racine government?
Well, I being a libertarian, I'm not too interested in having a lot of redundancy amongst personnel, but I can understand it in a physical plant. I don't want 2 mayors.
well, we got a mayor and a city manager,
or 2 commissioners of public works and that type of stuff. But I think the city. I mean, I saw the commissioner of public works go, and it ran perfectly well without a commissioner for several years. Mm-hmm. Rooney and Eeg, the backups, the assistants, ran that department just fine. So there was redundancy. I don't think any position in government is often that critical, that technical that 2 people can't back it up. But anyway, go ahead. I want to be careful with redundancy in government. Is all. Our taxes are high enough. I don't want to.
Well, redundancy in physical plant infrastructure.
Yeah, in the infrastructure. Yeah, I can understand it. There's certain things that we need. I guess we need.
No,
go ahead.
In terms of connectivity. You're talking about an infrastructure in a community, but also the infrastructure has to be able to access. I mean, you have to be able to use your infrastructure to access other communities,
right.
The world at large. How much has to go into that? Like if we were to build a broadband system here, a high-speed internet system here, how capable are we of communicating with the outside world with what we have here then? I mean, is it mostly through microwave at this point in time?
No, you would connect up to different routes, just like we did with the campus in Illinois. There's other fiber optic routes running through railroads. A lot of railroads also have fiber optics running on the same track bed.
Oh, yeah, it makes sense. It's probably a profit center for them.
Right,
yeah.
And the same with the expressways. Mm-hmm. Like on the expressways, you have on the sides of the road where you have conduit running and you have super high-speed fiber optics with multiple carriers. So all you have to do is connect up from your city onto that fiber optic carrier that may be embedded in the expressway or may be embedded in the railroad. So there's different ways to connect like that. And the more you do that, the more robust, again, you are because you have more pathways.
Yeah, you got that redundancy.
Yeah.
Doc, were you asking about what our current status was? How are we set up now for connectivity?
No.
Okay,
I was saying that if we build up our technological infrastructure, our communication infrastructure here, how available is access to
Okay, so there's plenty of it around. We just need to build ours up.
Yeah.
Got it.
But I was going to say, a friend of mine is very much involved in internet technology out east. And he was telling me the Big Dig, you're familiar with that in Boston?
Yes.
The big tunnel? He was explaining to me how you can still use your cell phone in the tunnel. Because they actually had to construct cables that leaked.
Right. Yeah.
Basically leaked the signal.
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of interesting from a layman's point of view,
Yeah.
So, now you've got an interesting history. I mean, we kind of jumped right into the discussion here, but you taught at Northwestern University for 20 years.
Right.
You worked at Bell Labs.
Yes. I work as an expert witness in civil and federal court.
Yeah.
Sometimes when these systems go down, people want to know what happened.
Whose fault was it?
And I've worked on multi-million-dollar lawsuits for people like AT&T. I worked on a multi-million-dollar lawsuit out in Las Vegas. It had to do with network infrastructure at a casino. And so, we're talking big money when these types of networks go down. There's a lot of money that goes through. I'll give you a great example. I did some work with the Chicago Mercantile Exchange a while back, a long time ago. And when you look at all the transaction values that are coming through their network, the 1 year I was working on it, they had $469 trillion worth of valued transactions running through a year. 469 trillion, not billion, trillion dollars.
Wow.
So imagine if a network like that goes down for 10 seconds.
Yeah.
You're talking a huge amount. So the backup, so when you're talking about backup, if it costs us $5 billion to put in this extra cable and extra fiber, it's nothing.
Cheap, yeah.
And not everybody has that, but when you have that type of money running on your networks, and it's the same with all these call centers. Like, remember all the catalog call centers like Sears and Spiegel's and all? Most of their money, their traffic came through the voice communication, 800 numbers. And you don't want to have something like that come down. And now there's more companies, smaller companies, that rely on call centers. And again, it's like they've taken huge redundant systems that were only for like the Fortune 50 or Fortune 100, and now smaller companies can utilize that type of technology because the technology has been, cost reduced to a point where a small company can take advantage of that.
I got a question for you, because you brought up a very interesting thing in your book about your education that I really like, and that he got his education at Bell Labs, which is a private company, and you said you were getting the best education on technology in the country at the time.
Yes.
And my concept of education is that the hospitals should be the ones training doctors, because they've got the up to the minute technology to do the training, and the technological company should be doing the training the engineers. It should be done in the private sector that way. And I'd just like you to just relate a little bit of your experience to what you're seeing in the private sector. You're saying the only one I knew of before what you told me, what you said about Bell Labs in the book, was Hamburger College, where McDonald's trains its managers at a college. They go there and they learn how to run a McDonald's franchise, which is brilliant. What better place to learn how to do it? You're not going to catch it at Parkside,
Well, it's sort of like a master apprentice type program.
It's beautiful.
And
you're getting the latest technology. You mentioned that in the book, too. Too often in schools they're teaching old stuff.
Yes, yeah. Well, I used to argue that when I was at Northwestern University, that, we have academics, but we need practitioners, and I guess that's the right word. You need a practitioner to teach what's going on because that person is immersed in what's going on today. Whereas an academic, they might have a PhD, but they haven't been in the field for years.
That's right. It's from way back. It's from 10 years old technology.
So I came up with a new word. I said, we need a pracademic. we're both a practitioner and an academic, because when you talk to a lot of the people taking classes, they didn't want to take certain courses like cybersecurity or network security. They wanted to take something from someone that was actually doing the work in the field versus someone that was just reading the book and saying, okay, I'm going to teach this course this semester.
That's brilliant. I think anybody watching this program that works in a hospital could understand the same thing could be applied to teaching doctors. At the hospitals, they're looking at the latest stuff, and the schools are teaching you stuff that's out of the manuals. Well, the schools, I'll tell you, some of the schools, when it comes to real estate, we were talking a little bit about high-tech real estate and intelligent buildings. Intelligent buildings, intelligent infrastructure. Intelligent buildings, I was a pioneer of a lot of things in intelligent buildings 30 years ago. 30 years ago was the beginning of intelligent building concepts. We still don't see an intelligent building course in most real estate curricula at any university. They talk about it maybe in a special topics course, but this is stuff that's 30 years old. It's not new. And so I say that in some of these courses and some of these curricula,
at best they're teaching at the 1950s, and at worst they're teaching real estate at the 1850s.
Now,
Well,
Professor,
speaking
I
of-
want
hang on
to
a
get
second,
to
George. Will you?
all right. I want to talk about intelligent buildings real quickly. Go
Okay,
ahead.
well, you've got this 30-year experience here in Racine. So tell us, what exactly could Racine be doing to get caught up? I don't think we're at pace right now. I think we've got a ways to go. So have you got some recommendations for the community at large? I mean,
Well, number one, they've got to get a sense of urgency. I don't think that when you look at Racine, I don't think that there's a sense of urgency as a collective, that we've got to get things moving. Whereas you go to some other smaller cities and towns, and they see that from a economic survival type of approach. We need to get things done. We need to open up things. We need to somehow connect into a fiber optic that's running down a railroad track that's 2 or 3 miles away. We need to somehow get connected in that, so then we can offer a much better platform for commerce that will attract new corporate facilities. I don't see that in Racine. I see sort of a mishmash of let's go here, but we have to improve what's in the street. We have to improve the infrastructure, and you can't rely on 80-year-old technology anymore. And it costs money. Everything costs money, but there's a payback in that type of investment. In other words, it's not an expense. It's an investment. There's a big difference. If you buy something and it's an expense, you look at it and you say, well, there's no value. If
one thing, I like the sense of urgency, but I think we have to distinguish between urgency and crisis. Too often, people get into a crisis mode and, oh my God, we got to do something right now, and that's a bad basis to make decisions on.
Right.
Yeah,
that's too late.
Yeah. Urgency means you're planning for the future, but you're doing it with expedience.
Right.
Crisis means like, oh my God, the ship is sinking.
I've seen some cities where they let it go so long they didn't have anything. They had no economic base to even pay for a $5,000 study. A friend of mine was going to do something for another a city that at one time was a prominent city in Illinois, that they just, like so many other cities, they lost their economic base, they lost some manufacturing. And he went to the city council and he said, well, you need to put in some new infrastructure. I can do a feasibility study on that in the Main Street area for $5,000. They couldn't scrape up $5,000. And that city's more or less a write-off now at this point.
Yeah.
And now, I was talking to someone else that there's a huge resurgence in, of all places, Detroit.
Oh yeah, I've heard that
Detroit
too. Yeah.
is starting to spend real money, and the corporations like Ford and all that are starting to take a look and say, what do we need to do to become world-class competitive again? And they're putting money in the infrastructure. They get it. And so does the government. They know they have to work as partners.
Now, you had a question, George, and I wanted to get a couple words in because I know you're excited about this whole conversation, and rightfully so, but what was your question?
The professor had talked about intelligent buildings, and we're not talking about things that know how to open doors and windows go up and down. The building isn't actually smart, and it's not layout, because I know any time you're designing a building, you want to make sure that the product flow through the building is smart.
Right.
When you're talking about an intelligent building, could you describe that a little more? Define that a little more exactly what you're talking about.
We'll talk about traditional amenities and intelligent amenities. Traditional amenities were like HVAC, parking. You want to have a building that's comfortable. You want to have
toilets.
Toilets,
bathrooms.
yeah.
Okay.
Elevators.
Okay.
All those things, people expect that.
Right.
And now what we need to do, we need to expect intelligent amenities, which are mostly power and broadband connectivity. The intelligent amenities means that I have redundancy coming in where, again, I'm not going to lose power in the building. I'm not going to lose connectivity from either my smartphone or any computer terminal that's in the building. And intelligent amenities, it's more than just having a lot of sensors in the building where your climate control. I mean, some people talk about intelligent buildings as ways to moderate and control building temperatures. That's part of it. But when you look at the whole building, you need to have the building provide all the capabilities that the tenants need, and that's going to be different from one building to the next.
So you're talking more in terms of connectivity, like you say, when you're talking about an intelligent building. You
Redundant power.
Redundant power.
We need redundancy. We need to build resilient facilities. And if we look at most corporate facilities and office buildings, they're not resilient.
All right, now let me take it in a little bit different direction here.
Okay.
The kind of the point of departure that we had earlier, where you were watching the show, and we were talking about Foxconn, and that was really what you had written into us. You have a different perspective on Foxconn than we have. We have the perspective that we're a little distrustful of the people that are like running this operation, not just the local politicians, but also there's a different culture over in Asia than what we're accustomed to here. We've been through this once before, where a contract is really kind of a starting point of the negotiations. This is what we would like to do, but there's adjustments that are made during the course of this
contract.
project.
And according to our resource that we're reading about, the contract in China and Taiwan is more like a
starting point.
A perspective, a plan. It's not a hardcore. We're going to do it this way or else.
I worked a lot with people in China and Singapore and Malaysia, and there's definitely a different culture. You can do things on a handshake, though, which you could never do here. There's a lot of trust.
We've got too many lawyers trying to make them.
Well, where I wanted to go is that you had talked about the things that are going to be developed in relationship to Foxconn. The things that are going to be happening in terms of infrastructure, etc.
Sure.
That cause you to be optimistic. So why don't you relate that to our audience a little bit?
If you look at the contract, if you get the press package from the governor's office, if you look at the contract, it says that the state of Wisconsin is going to put forth $3 billion, which that's a lot of money. But if you read through the contract, part of that contract says Foxconn, before they even open up the doors, has to lay out $5.6 billion to local contractors in construction and infrastructure. So the way I read that is that Wisconsin is putting up $3 billion, but right up front, before they hire one person at Foxconn, they're going to be spending almost 2 to 1, $5.6 billion, 2 to 1 to build all this up in that area in Racine County.
Well, we're up to $4.5 billion and counting at this point.
Well,
so,
but we're still putting up $3 billion of the 5.6.
Well, the things I wanted you to talk about was like the infrastructure things, like the highway, a smart highway.
This was something we were talking about this on a public policy radio in Milwaukee with Mary Glass, that they're going to put in sensors between the Foxconn facility and Mitchell Field along the highway, along 94, so that you can run driverless trucks. You can run what they call autonomous driving trucks, where you can go from one point to the other and you can deliver different things. And part of the improvement to the road is to put these sensors in where the trucks can track with the sensors.
And they better darn well have redundancy for those.
Exactly. And my take is that if we're going to do that for Foxconn, who else can benefit from that? We also have Uline out there. We've got Amazon out there. If you can get a couple other companies to utilize that same sensors and that same capability, all of a sudden you're getting a payback. Now you're getting multiple payback, because now it's not just one company that's benefiting it, it's the whole region. Anybody that locates here, they're going to be part of that smart highway. And that's something that's more cutting edge than what you see.
Now, who's putting those sensors in? Is that the government or is that Foxconn?
No, that's the government.
That's this in addition to $3 billion you're talking about, Doc?
That's additional infrastructure pieces that they have to. In other words, what some of the surrounding areas are doing is that they have to improve that platform for commerce. They have to improve the infrastructure. By putting in sensors in the road, and now you're going to set up things where you can run trucks, driverless trucks, back and forth from the airport to that. Well, you can maybe extend that down 94, and you can have Amazon connect into it, Uline connected, and maybe some other places that we're not even talking about today, but that track is there.
And then it brings in more.
That brings in more because someone else, let's say a Corning or whatever, says, well, I want to be close to Foxconn, But I can also use the sensor-based tracking,
which cuts down our driver cost to get equipment to
And it's again, it's competitive because it cuts down the cost of work,
shipping,
and it cuts down shipping, and it makes everybody more competitive. And that's exactly what they do in China. They have a real great example was around the bay going to Hong Kong. It's an 18.5-hour drive by truck. They built a 20-mile bridge to cut across the bay to make that drive in 45 minutes so that they could get all these facilities that were making all different products to the international airport. Instead of taking 18 hours to get there, they take 45 minutes to an hour to get there. And they see value. They see huge value in that.
Well, I don't think we've lost our skepticism, but the project is going forward.
You can see by all the dirt that they're moving.
It's not going to stop. So we're hopeful. We hope that it does work. You've given us some insights into how it might possibly be beneficial in ways that we possibly didn't consider before. And before we go, it's time to close out the show. I want to remind everybody about your book, Location, Connectivity.
And where can you get it?
It's available on Amazon. It's available at Barnes & Noble online, and it's a great price. It's $39.95. It's not textbook price. And I've seen textbooks at $200, $300, $400. This is just as comprehensive as any textbook.
Well, it's used as a text at what university?
Fountainhead College is using it right now.
And where did you say that is?
That's out in Tennessee.
Tennessee. All right. Well, come on back again sometime.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks for coming here,
Thank
Professor.
you very much.
There you go. Have the rest of your Monday be a very, very enjoyable one, and we'll see you next week. Thank you for being here.